You step into an elevator. Someone else is already inside. You nod, maybe. Then you turn, face the doors, and watch the numbers climb. You do not look at them again. Not once. Not for the entire ride, even though they are standing less than 3 feet away from you. Why? You'd think if a stranger stood that close to you anywhere else, you'd talk to them, acknowledge them, at least glance over now and then. But something about that small metal box turns two people into two silent statues, both staring at the same set of numbers, both pretending the other isn't there. You tell yourself it's just awkward, but the real answer is far older and far stranger than awkwardness. What you're doing in that elevator has a name, and a scientist gave it that name almost 60 years ago. In the late 1960s, a sociologist named Erving Goffman spent years studying how strangers behave around each other in public. He noticed something curious. People aren't actually ignoring each other in shared spaces. They're performing a very specific, very deliberate kind of attention. Goffman called it civil inattention. You glance at a stranger just long enough to register that they exist, that they're not a threat, that you've acknowledged their presence as a fellow human being, and then, crucially, you look away. Not because you don't care, because looking away is the polite thing to do. It says, I see you, and I trust you enough not to stare. Think about that for a second. Looking away from a stranger isn't rudeness. It's a form of respect so automatic you've never once had to be taught it directly, and yet you perform it flawlessly every single day dozens of times without ever consciously deciding to. An elevator breaks this system in a very particular way. Civil inattention works because there's usually somewhere else to look. A street has shop windows, other people, a horizon. A waiting room has magazines, phones, a television bolted to the wall. An elevator has almost nothing. 4 walls, a floor, a ceiling, and a small panel of numbers slowly counting upward. When there's nowhere else believable to direct your eyes, that panel of numbers becomes the only acceptable place to stare that isn't another person's face. It's not that you're fascinated by which floor you're passing. It's that the numbers are the only object in the room that lets you avoid the one thing civil inattention forbids, staring. Here's where it gets more interesting. This isn't really about the eyes at all. It's about distance. In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Edward T. Hall mapped out something he called Proxemics, the study of how much physical space humans need around them and how that space changes depending on who's in it. Hall identified 4 rough zones. Intimate distance, reserved for people you're extremely close to. Personal distance, for friends and casual conversation. Social distance, for acquaintances and strangers you're actively interacting with. And public distance, the space you keep from people you're not interacting with at all, like a stranger across a room. An elevator forces you into intimate distance, sometimes less than 18 inches, with someone who is, in almost every case, a complete stranger. That's a distance your body was never built to tolerate calmly outside of relationships built on trust. And you can't leave. You can't step back. You can't reposition yourself the way you would anywhere else, drifting a little farther apart mid-conversation without either of you noticing. The box has already decided how close you'll stand, and it has decided you'll be closer than almost any stranger interaction in your entire day. Have you ever noticed how much more comfortable a crowded elevator feels than one with just 2 people in it? That seems backward. More people should mean more crowding, more discomfort. Why does it often feel like the opposite? Because a crowd dilutes the violation. With 6 strangers packed into a small box, no one person is uniquely responsible for standing too close to you. The intimacy gets spread thin, shared, anonymized. But with just one other person, there's no diffusing it. It's just you then, an intimate distance neither of you chose, and no socially acceptable place to put your eyes except a small illuminated number climbing slowly toward your floor. A psychologist named Robert Summer ran some of the earliest experiments on exactly this kind of discomfort. In the 1950s and 60s, he studied how people react when someone sits or stands too close to them in a public space, libraries, park benches, waiting areas. He found that when personal space is violated, especially by a stranger, people rarely say anything. Instead, they shift their bodies. They angle away. They find something, anything, to occupy their eyes and hands. Complaining out loud felt, to almost everyone Summer studied, far more socially costly than simply enduring the discomfort in silence. Which means that quiet, numbers watching stillness in the elevator isn't passivity. It's a carefully calibrated response, honed by decades of social learning, to a violation your body clearly registers, but your culture has taught you never to name out loud. This is the part that tends to surprise people. Your discomfort in that elevator isn't really social anxiety or awkwardness or shyness. It's closer to a basic territorial instinct, one you share, in some form, with an enormous range of other species. Many animals maintain a flight distance, a minimum space beyond which an approaching creature triggers alarm and the animal moves away. Humans mostly can't run in an elevator. So instead of retreating with our feet, we retreat with our eyes. Consider what your body actually does during that 30-second ride. Heart rate can tick up slightly. Breathing can shift, sometimes shallower, sometimes more controlled. Muscles in the shoulders and neck often stiffen just slightly, angling the body a few degrees away from the other person, even when there's nowhere left to angle toward. None of this is dramatic. None of this reaches the level of what you'd call fear, but it is measurable, and it is real, and it happens whether or not you consciously notice it happening. Your nervous system is quietly managing an intimate distance encounter with a total stranger, using the same basic toolkit it would use for any unexpected closeness, just turned down to a low, background hum instead of a full alarm. Here's the twist that reframes the whole ride. You might assume this discomfort is a flaw, something an evolved, socially advanced species should have grown out of by now. But territorial spacing instincts like this one exist precisely because, for most of human history, unregulated closeness with a stranger genuinely mattered. Someone standing 18 inches from you, someone you couldn't identify, couldn't predict, couldn't run from, was not a neutral event for your ancestors. It was information. It required assessment. Every part of the system now quietly humming in a steel box between the 3rd and 9th floor was, for nearly all of human history, doing exactly the job it was designed to do, keeping you safe around unknown people in close quarters. Modern elevators didn't remove that instinct. They just placed it inside a context deliberately engineered to be safe, brief, and mundane, while leaving the underlying wiring completely untouched. You know, rationally, that the stranger beside you is almost certainly not a threat. Your ancient spacing system doesn't fully get the memo. It just quiets down faster than it would in open space, because the ride is short, and because looking at the numbers gives it somewhere harmless to send your attention while it works. There's a small, almost tender detail in all of this that's easy to miss. Everyone in that elevator is running the exact same program. The stranger staring at the numbers beside you isn't comfortable either. They're not immune to the closeness, or unaware of you, or unbothered by the silence. They're performing civil inattention right back at you, offering you the same quiet gift you're offering them. Acknowledgement without intrusion, presence without demand. Neither of you asked for this particular kind of closeness. Both of you are handling it, wordlessly, with a piece of social choreography so well rehearsed neither of you had to learn its steps on purpose. So the next time you step into an elevator and find your eyes drifting, unbidden, to a small lit number above the door, notice what's actually happening. It isn't boredom. It isn't rudeness. It's an ancient spacing instinct and a newer social contract working together, in real time, to get two strangers through an impossibly close, impossibly brief encounter without either of you having to say a single word. You step out of the elevator. Someone else was already inside. You never really looked at them, and neither did they look at you. And in that mutual, practiced silence, you both did something far more human than eye contact ever could have. You gave each other exactly enough space to feel safe, without either of you having to ask for it.